So when you formed Toy Productions with your two partners, what was the objective of that company?
Well, that was the toy came from Turtletail, Bornstein, and Yorkin, and we that was toy. And the objective was uh, Saul and Bernie had a show they wanted to get on the air, uh, which I thought was a natural to get on. They were having, for whatever reasons, a tougher time to get it on because they hadn't gotten any of their own shows on. And I said, well, I'll help you get that show on. And so I went in on this show called What's Happening that went on to ABC and worked on the pilot and directed the pilot. And we got an order, and the show went on for 3 years or 4 years, I guess it was. And so while that was on, uh, I had gone to see In the Heat of the Night, but if you remember that picture,
Of course.
yeah. And I thought, geez, that is a television show. And I mentioned that to Saul. I said, here's a show. Why don't we put a black cop into a white world and reverse the thing? And you got a not an Archie Bunker, but you got a white sergeant and a black cop, and put it in the country. I think you'd have a wonderful show. And they said, yeah, gee, how do we do that? So I said, let me talk to Fred Silverman at ABC. And I talked to Fred. And he said, oh, yeah, I love that idea. Let's do it. Let's go do it. So we put that together and did that pilot. And that show got on, and that stayed for 3.
That became
Carter Country. That was kind of a country show based on a black-white relationship. And then we came up with an idea. I wanted to use Eileen Brennan, who I'd worked with in Divorce American Style, and I've known her for a long time. I think she's brilliant.
wonderful actress. Yeah.
Wonderful actress. And so we came up with an idea to use her to do Queens Boulevard, that became the show, where it's all about 4 women who live in different apartments in Queens.
In the city of New York.
City of New York, Queens of New York. And Eileen would be the lead character, and we would deal with the housewives, if you will. They have children. One did. No professional women. They were all in that apartment, and their lives with their husbands, and and one was single and so forth. And we did that, and ABC liked that, and they put that on. So we had those 3 shows on very quickly in 3 years. And so I said, I'm out to Saul. Right? I said, geez, I'm working harder now than I did when I was with Norman. I don't need this. I really didn't want it, not for them, because I love those 2 guys. I think they're both terrific. So they said, well, gee, what are we going to do? We don't. And I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. You want some money? Yeah. I said, all right. Let me sell the company. I'll sell the company for you. And I went to Columbia and Screen Gems, and they bought Toy. And they gave Saul and Bernie had to stay with it for 3 years or 4 years or whatever they had the employment contract, and I was out on my way and left.
Didn't you, as producers of What's Happening, come in for some criticism from the black community, and that it was thought to be demeaning to black people?
No. Well, what we got was, which is so amazing to me, because I've had this fight now, Norm and I have had it forever, that only a black man can write black dialogue, or and you can't have a white man write a black, well, I say, obviously, then you can't have a black man write a white dialogue, so there'd never be any blacks working in the industry then, because 98% white shows and 98% movies are. So it's a foul. But we did have a pressure group that came in and said, it's all that hip black. You're making all the blacks talk with hip black. And I said, first of all, we don't write every show, and we did have 2 or 3 blacks on the show, on the writing staff, because I'm very much aware of having, which Norm and I did. We put as many as we could find and as many as we could break into, and there were very successful ones. We came out of our group, but we did have that pressure group, and they did give us time And how do you want these kids to talk? I said, I don't know. That was their big problem, not what they were doing, but they didn't like their what's happening. They didn't even like that as why are they always saying what's happening? Well, I don't know why they say it. I guess a lot of blacks say it, and it seems fairly honest to me.
But it was not the reason for the show's cancellation?
No, no. The reason the reason they made for the cancellation was one of the tragic errors that Marcy Carsey ever made in her life, in my opinion.
She was at ABC then.
She was at ABC, and because the show, she thought the show didn't blend in with what they had on that night, even though it was like in the top 10. It was like, when they canceled that show, it was number 7 or number 6 or 1, something like that. And that's why the sale worked for me for Columbia, because they immediately took it and made another year of it, syndicated it for the 5th year, and then sold it as a package. They had their 100 episodes. She made it, and the network went down the drain. Started to go down. That was the downfall. Starting the downfall is when they whipped out. In 1 year, they whipped Carter and What's Happening off, and they never recovered after that. And she went on to become a multimillionaire on her own in another way.
Best thing that ever happened to her.
Yeah.
Now, you've worked in live television, you work in film television, you work in motion pictures. I wonder if you could discuss the differences among those three. Working live TV, film TV, motion pictures.
I think the difference, live has the sense of real theatrics. It's happening. It's why you love to watch a football game, because you know it's happening right now, or you watch the news and it's happening. Film has the feeling that it's film. It takes on another kind of energy, that you filmed it, you rehearsed it. Nobody's going to make a mistake. If they do, you're going to redo it, and you.
So it's more polished.
Yeah, I think it is. I think to some extent it is.
But less spontaneous.
Less spontaneous. I think is true. I think from a directing point of view, they're much different. I think there are very few directors in television that live can do complicated shows, which to duplicate what you can do in film, where you can shoot one person and cut it down to 3 frames, or to do the kind of energy that you can possibly do by editing a piece of film is one thing. To do that, duplicate that in live is very difficult. You better have somebody who has an enormous amount of moxie and know where you can get trapped on live television and where you cannot get trapped. And a typical example to me, quite honestly, someday people will examine, they did an ER on quote, on videotape live, and that was not live. See, they had no idea how to shoot a live show. So all they did is they took it on a steady cam, and they kept moving it around and doing what is known as masters, shooting the whole group from one angle, shooting the whole group from another, move it around. You could have done that with a film camera. But they did it live, and it was good publicity stuff, but it had nothing to do with being live. Live is can you get everything that you can get on film on a live camera? It's a camera, you should be able to do it, but it has to happen right then. You don't have any chance for a mistake. Motion picture film, you think in much bigger terms. You think you got a big screen to fill. You can't sit there and do. Television is basically a close-up, as we all know. Film, you have the picture is bigger. You have a bigger plane to fill. So your framing, your staging is different. You want to make it more interesting. You have to worry about details even more so on a film, because you're going to see what's on a desk, whereas maybe on a television film you would not worry, because you're in tight enough that you wouldn't know what's on the desk or not.
You have the advantages of time and budget.
And you have much more time and budget on both, in a strange way. I mean, I think you have more time and budget even on a television film than you may have on. I mean, what they do, for example, on soap operas are amazing to me. That's they knock those out in an hour, or camera time, or 2 hours, whatever it is. That's amazing work that they can do that.
Did all your grounding in live television make you a better film director and a better motion picture director, a better television film director? If
I'm
you
not sure. I'm not sure about that. See, I think you can get in some bad habits too. Some of these kids that come in now, the younger directors who are brilliant and do things and try different things, they're not afraid, nor have they had any experience to know. So they're willing to try things that are totally I may not ever try or even attempt, or they come in with an idea that I would have never thought of. In one way, I think it hinders you. I mean, I think in one way you get set in a way and you say, gee, that's why I did it there. Why would I change? And in the old days, it was very helpful. Like when I did Come Blow Your Horn, I shot that in 40 days, 42 days with Frank. You couldn't do that if you didn't have a lot of experience from live. I was able to do almost, I knew camera-wise exactly what I was going to do. In fact, I said to Frank one day, we were doing a scene, he's always complaining it was taking too long. And I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. You come in tomorrow, and I'll be set. You do one take. If you do it right, we'll do 10 pages, 8 pages. You can leave. You'll be done by 10 o'clock. He said, great. I brought in 3 film cameras, blocked it with the performers before they got there even, with stand-ins, motion picture camera. Frank came in. I said, let's go. The problem was he couldn't do 8 pages, but I was ready. So you can do certain, I mean, if you have to do, and there are a lot of multiple cameras that are shot. A lot of directors. Frankenheimer, I'm sure, uses 2 or 3 on every film he does at the same time. So you're covered. You're getting a lot of coverage with that.
By way of summing up, it's now about almost 50 years since you started your career.
Has it been that long?
Well, you got out of school in the 40s, late 40s.
Yeah, I did. So it's 58, 68, 78, 88. God, don't
And
know. It
you
is 50
continue
years.
to work.
Pardon me?
You continue to work.
Trying to.
Is it very important for you to continue to work?
It is, yeah.
Why?
Well, I'm terrified that I don't know what I would do with myself if I didn't work. It means something to me in several ways. One is that I do have little children. In the second marriage, I'm reliving my life, and I don't want to feel like I'm a guy in a rocking chair, which maybe I should be, but I don't want to feel like I am with these kids around, and for my own sake. So one way that I can stay energized and get involved is to get involved in a lot of things, And I was reading a book that the late Viktor Frankl wrote, and he was trying to sum up what happiness is, And he puts he sums up happiness. What number one is the ability to do things that make you happy, particularly in the workplace. Do you think? And I believe that. I believe that even though it's more difficult, it is more difficult for me because I'm not today's flavor of the month. I'm an older person. It's a young man's medium, particularly television, and it should be. I've got my start takes that. The executives are young. They're going to hire younger people, and that's the way it should be. But with all that, see, I always think that if you have the right idea, if you have the right piece of material, if you have the right kind of thing, you should go ahead and do it whether you're older or younger. I'm going to do the next picture I'm going to do is a remake. I did Blade Runner, which was a big hit picture, 1980, so we're 18 years ago. We're going to do a sequel on it. Now, I'm not the guy to direct that. Ridley Scott directed the original, and I don't know if I'll use Ridley on the second one. I know I can make my contributions to that picture, which I did on the first, from a story concept, from a taste concept, from whatever my vision may be, even though I don't think I could ever do the job, for example, that Ridley Scott did of directing it. I don't think I'm the right man to direct that. But I'll be totally happy producing that picture. I'll be totally happy getting my 2 cents into it and working.
Is that in pre-production yet?
We're in the script right now. the script.
I know this is a difficult question, and it's kind of a traditional one. But looking back over your career, and maybe you've already answered this question, what would you consider the highlight? Would it be the Fred Astaire, the evening with Fred Astaire?
Well, no, I think that's one of them. That would be one of my highlights. Of the An Evening with Fred Astaire would be one. I think All in the Family certainly was a highlight to me. The whole building of the company that I thought was really, at one time we had wonderful, enormous number of people because we had so many shows on a year, and to see those people grow up to be what they are today, and we had there are a lot of good producers and writers that grew out of our group that came in young.
And yet you always remained an independent. You were never part of
No.
a studio structure.
No,
by
never.
design, I think.
It was, yeah. It was by design, and we never had an agent. Well, everybody said that you'll never get along without an agent because you won't get anybody because they can't package. Nobody ever packaged our shows. We never gave a penny's commission to MCA, ICM, CAA, no one, and it shows that I don't think you need. I think this town is fairer than people think it is, and that. So we were. That I take great satisfaction in doing that. And then there are a couple motion pictures that I've done in my life that I take a lot of satisfaction in. And one is Start the Revolution Without Me, which is kind of a cult picture, and the other one is Twice in a Lifetime, which is a picture that I did based on my divorce. A very painful picture, which I dealt with my other children and that family with Gene Hackman. And I'm proud of that picture because I think that picture deals with a subject in a very painful way, but shows both sides of the story. That there's not
Picture of substance, actually.
Yes, it was. So I feel that was a highlight.
Regrets are kind of hapless, but do you have any regrets about things you might have done and didn't? You already mentioned not picking up on the Neil Simon property.
Yeah, that's one. And I regret that I didn't do a Broadway show because I've always wanted to do one, and I did have the opportunity to do it, and I turned that down. I regret that. In some ways, I know this sounds tough. In some ways, I regret that by the amount of television I did, and the time that it took, and the amount of time that I spent at rehearsal halls or readings or tapings, that I missed a lot of family life. My older children grew up to a great extent without me being home, or on the weekend. And I think I let things, in television, you don't have a vacation when everybody else does. The show's off, you finish taping or filming in February, you take off 4 weeks or 6, whatever, February or March, and then you're back writing, April, May, and June you start to film, or July. So I never had the opportunity to go away, spend the summer with my kids during a long period of my life. And I kind of regret, I've talked that over with them, I kind of regret that.
Can anybody have a dynamic, successful career and not sacrifice family to some extent?
Well, there are some people that do. I mean, I don't know how they do it, but I think you do have to. But see, if you're doing pictures or you're doing something like that, that's a concentrated period of time. And then you do have time off that's the greatness of that. You're editing, you don't have to take full time. And then you have time off till you get your next one going. And you can write it and take 3 hours a day, or you can write with some, whatever. Television, it's a monster. You're working, if you got a series, it's a monster. You're working around the clock, and you're already worried about next year. You haven't finished this year, and you're worried about what are we going to do next year.
But when you're a great success, it's like having a tiger by the tail. You can't let go. I mean, that success is only going to come around once.
I know.
How can you let go?
Well, that's the part of it. That's what I didn't do. It's the greed. It is the greed in a certain way. And it's not money, but it's the greed that when you're offered something, and they say, "Here, do it. Here, we'll put it on." you say, gee, I don't really want to, but I'm not going to turn it down. I got to, okay, I'll put it on. So you're right. And they've got you coming and going. And by the time you do that, you look around and you say, wait a minute, where's it all gone? Time, Norman had a saying, and I always thought was great. Time magazine comes twice a week to us now. Life is going by so fast that I can't keep up with it. Well, it did then too. You say, how can that season be over? But it was over, and it is that. You're absolutely right. It's one of the reasons I think that people don't last a long period of time in television. You just can't keep it up. It's amazing if creative people, Stephen Bochco, I think he's so terrific. The guy can just turn out as much as he can. But then you can take guys like Jim Brooks, who's brilliant. Jim, his body of work was never that huge. What he did was great, but even he then had to move on. It's a medium that demands an awful lot from people that are involved.
No question. When you watch television today, are you dismayed or you fairly pleased with what you see on television?
I think they're good. I think there are very good things on it and some that aren't so good. I think it has its share of good things. I mean, I look at sitcoms there, and I think there are 2 or 3 today that are terrific, and probably in our day there was some more than 2 or 3 that were really terrific too. And they're certainly doing now. There's such a selection now. I mean, between all the stations, there's not only 3 crap games like we used to have. There was, if you didn't get on one of the networks, you were dead. Now you can go, and you got TNT and you've got all the other stations. You have a choice.
Their overemphasis on sexually oriented comedy.
Yeah, I don't. I think that is. We never did a cheap shot. I could honestly say Norman and I never did anything that was a cheap shot to get a laugh. And the easiest way to get a laugh is a double entendre is without a doubt the simplest way to get a laugh. We never wrote one. I can go back to any of our shows. I don't ever remember a cheap laugh thrown in. And I get offended to the amount of that. For me, the great liberal of all time, to be saying is tough to say, but it really offends my taste that I see a lot of that on sitcom. Double entendre everywhere.
Sometimes freedoms get corrupted.
Yes. Who said that? Somebody did.
What, in your opinion, represents the best of television today?
Today?
Yeah. These days.
Well, I must admit that I run the PBS. I'll check that out before I check anything out on a network. It's a rarity that I don't see what's on. If I'm home, I look and see that first, if it's the masterpiece there. So that, I think they do a wonderful job and deserve a much more backing than we give them, PBS. I think a lot of the motion pictures of the week, movies of the week now, they're doing subjects that pictures won't attach. They're too small a subject. So they've taken over the kind of things that I think I would have liked to have done in pictures, dealing with subjects and so. So I think that's an important step that television now carries. And the news is it's still great. I mean,
not the local news, certainly.
No. But when you get on the investigator, you get a 2020 or something like that. I think those are always they're attacking, dealing with things that only television can do uniquely, and then sports. So, I mean, the medium is here to stay. It's only going to get. I mean, I hope I'm around to see it when it happens stacked up.
Along those lines, I don't know whether you're a futurist, but we're headed for the 21st century. What do you think television is going to be like in the next century?
Well, you're going to have it's going to be your digital. They're going to be stacked up. There are going to be so many stations. Instead of what we have today, which we think are a lot, you're going to have a choice of. I don't know how they're going to fill it, with 200 channels or 220 channels, but you're certainly going to have the capabilities of that to begin with. You're going to have the capabilities of putting it on your computers in and out. That's a foregone conclusion.
Is more always better?
No, I don't think so. But that's here. That's why. Why? That's why stations are getting the money they're getting when people buy them, because they all want they want to be here for the explosion in the year 2015. That's when everybody's that station's gonna double. Your stations will double or triple in the year 2015. That's the time limit they have on the isn't that
I don't think it's that far. I think it's 205 maybe, 2005.
Oh, is it that soon?
Yeah, I think it's, I may be wrong on that, but I don't think it's 2015.
No, well, 2000, geez, that's even worse.
Yeah.
Coming soon. But you're going to see maybe I'm exaggerating when you're going to see 300, but you're going to see another 50 or 60 stations right away, aren't you?
Yeah. I once asked a colleague of yours, Dan Curtis, how he'd like to be remembered, and he said, just say, not for dark shadows. So I'll ask you the question, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, let's see, that's a big question. I think as someone who's treated everyone fairly that I've been involved with, I've never tried to take advantage of anyone, and I think that would be a nice way to be remembered.
All right, fair enough. And if I may, just as a last area of discussion, I'm going to throw some names at you, and if you have had any kind of a relationship with them, if you just comment briefly about that, your feelings about them, your impressions.
Okay.
You've already, I'm not going to mention Pat Weaver again because you already told me about him. Did you have any dealings with David Sarnoff?
Yes.
How so?
Just a quick met him. I thought he was a very quiet, substantial man. Very reflective, I think is the word.
During the years that you were at NBC, in those early years, there was a powerhouse of a man named Bob Kintner there. Do you have any direct contact with Bob Kintner?
The only thing I have with Bob Kintner is Fred Coe calling him up and telling him to come down here, and then he would complain to Bob Kintner, look at your studio, I can't get a prop, I can't get anything. And Bob Kintner would listen patiently and leave.
That would have been quite a clash of personalities between those two. You mentioned Hal March earlier.
Hal March, he was a good
You
friend.
worked with Hal March?
Yeah, I worked with him on a show called The Soldiers. Right. He and Tom DeAndre did. He was a very dear man. Went too early. Very sweet.
Very early, didn't he?
Yeah, he died in his 40s, I think.
Yeah. Bill Paley. You mentioned the one encounter at least with Bill Paley.
Well, Bill Paley off and on we met. Bill Paley to me deserves far more credit than he's ever gotten. Here's a man that television owes a lot to.
Well, we